You know what I loved about old Star Wars games like the original Battlefront 2, The Force Unleashed, Revenge of the Sith? They had game modes and things you could do in Star Wars that didn't make sense. Crazy battles and scenarios or lightsaber duels you could play out just because they were fun. These games were sandboxes, built for fans to play around in. And EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 has some of this as well. BB-8 I think is the perfect example. You can defeat Darth Vader as BB-8 in Heroes vs Villains. No one ever thought you'd be able to do that in a video game. Now Star Wars Battlefront 2 is the everything Star Wars game. You've got your large-scale supremacy mode, heroes modes, vehicles, starfighter assault, team deathmatch, even Ewok hunt. Man, there's so many game modes. But more recent Star Wars games seem to be moving away from this style of game. Jedi Fallen Order, the immersive Jedi experience. Star Wars Squadrons, the in-depth starfighter fleet battle game. These are the only two games so far since Battlefront 2, but there seems to be a trend of developing these more tailored, smaller experiences. Is this the way of the future for Star Wars games? And was Battlefront 2 too big? Hey everyone, it's Andrew. I've talked about this before on the channel. EA a few months ago said they were doubling down on Star Wars games in the next few years, meaning we'll hopefully see at least one new Star Wars game released each year. So how do these games fit in with Lucasfilm and Disney's plans for Star Wars? We're not seeing another Star Wars film until at least 2021, but we are getting new seasons of The Mandalorian, the Obi-Wan TV series, The Bad Batch, the Clone Wars sequel, a lot of new Star Wars stories being added to the canon. So do new Star Wars games even need to fit into the canon? When taking a look back at the history of cancelled Star Wars games, you have to think that some of the games didn't make it just because the game's ideas were possibly too big or didn't fall into the grand master plan for the future of Star Wars. If there even was one. The fact Daisy Ridley revealed a while back that J.J. Abrams hadn't decided who Rey was right until the very end is a bit disheartening. But a lot of these games got cancelled around the time of the Disney takeover. They were taking a new direction, understandable but very disappointing. But my question is, why do new Star Wars games even need to be canon? Well, today what I've got for you is a conversation I had with Sage from UPLINK podcast, previously the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. I recently appeared on the podcast. I thought some of what we talked about was really interesting, the future of Star Wars games, the idea of making a Star Wars sandbox game, and whether or not Star Wars games even need to be canon. This is a continuation of the last part of this episode I shared with you guys last week, where we talked more about Squadrons. You can find that one in the top right corner or listen to the full podcast in the description. So are we going to see more games like Squadrons and Fallen Order? And what would a Star Wars sandbox game look like?
So we've had the gigantic game that is Battlefront 2. Huge, massive scope, 3 development companies working on it, but it also faced a lot of problems at launch like we just mentioned there. We've also had Jedi Fallen Order, which is a smaller story-based game. Very fascinating to see. It outperformed all of the expectations that was put on it before launch, but smaller scale game mode. It had the update later on to add the Jedi, what was it, the battle arena?
Yeah, the combat challenges game mode. Yeah.
Yep. There it is, combat challenges. And we also now have Squadrons, a very niche game as focusing on a subset of the community that was really discovered with the event of Battlefront 2 and how popular that game mode was, at least at launch. But my question is, do you think we will see more smaller scale game modes? Obviously, they don't have much of as huge of an ask in terms of development. They can be developed on a 1 to 2 year cycle like we see that Squadrons was. Do you see the future of Star Wars games being something along like we have more releases of story-based games and then we have like an online game maybe instead of every year we have one every like 3 to 4 years?
It's interesting you say that. I remember us talking about this last time I was on the podcast with Eckhart Slatter. I was talking about kind of how Squadrons or even Fallen Order potentially impacts or influences the future of Star Wars games. A big thing that I keep talking about is how EA a few months ago said that they're going to double down on Star Wars games in the next few years, meaning I guess they're going to be producing at least a game a year, right? If they've only released, 4 AAA titles since they took over the license in 2013, yep, which were Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, Jedi Fallen Order, and Star Wars Squadrons. So 4 games in 7 years isn't necessarily a lot, but when you look at the scope and scale of the games, perhaps it is, because, you know, when it comes to gameplay, map building.
Huge.
Exactly. That said, EA does have a vast amount of other studios at their disposal who could be working on other titles. So I think a lot of people hold them accountable to that and being like, hey, where are the other games? We thought you were going to go crazy with this and just, make as much as possible. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, I've kind of theorized that, yes, with that comment being made about doubling down, that they are going to make a lot of similar games to Squadrons and Fallen Order, perhaps more niche experiences, more, less Battlefront 2-esque, less of the, this is the everything Star Wars game with a single player mode, a multiplayer mode with all different types of, across all eras and different types of maps and game modes and Starfighter Assault and the heroes and everything. It's like the everything Star Wars game, whereas Squadrons is just the Starfighter game. Jedi Fallen Order is just the Jedi experience game. It'd be great to see, like, I guess, a bounty hunter style game. I know there were a few that got cancelled over the past few years at other EA studios. Remember, there was one at Visceral that was supposed to be like a Uncharted inspired game. Who knows? Well, do you remember in 2016, I think it was, we got that, there was this video dropped onto the EA Star Wars YouTube channel called EA Star Wars A Look Ahead, I'm pretty sure is what it was called.
Yes. And
it was basically a video that showcased the work of all studios at EA working on Star Wars titles. And there was some stuff in there about Battlefront 2 at DICE. There was stuff in there about Galaxy of Heroes. There was stuff in there about the Old Republic at BioWare, and there was the Visceral Studios Amy Hennig project, and they kind of showcased that one as well. So that studio got shut down. That was at the Redwood Shores San Francisco office, which is actually the EA headquarters around the world. It's like the main location for EA. So who knows, man? I know we all want more Star Wars experiences. I wonder if it's also a question of their relationship with Lucasfilm. I wonder if Lucasfilm are, I don't know, like, did they want to keep producing more and more Star Wars games, knowing that that's more Star Wars lore and content and stories? Like, are they trying to limit that amount of thing? Are they trying to drip feed it to us so that we don't get tired of Star Wars? Perhaps that's, perhaps that's not true. Maybe that's just a stupid idea I'm just, coming up with. But yeah, like, I hope we see more, man.
So okay, we've got a new Star Wars game coming out. This is all hypothetical. We've got a new Star Wars game coming out, but it's announced that it won't have any single player. What is your reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that, as long as the multiplayer is tight enough that it has the level of depth that is going to keep me playing and keep me consistent. The same goes for, Jedi Fallen Order had no multiplayer, and sometimes, I wish it did. It'd be great to get like a lightsaber versus mode, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? No, like, it's fine. It's a fun experience in itself, and like, it's done really well because of that. It doesn't need multiplayer. What's interesting, I think, about Fallen Order though, is when you compare it to a game that I think is somewhat similar in design, not necessarily in terms of world building and kind of the Metroidvania style of Jedi Fallen Order, but Ghost of Tsushima, I think, is probably one of the closest stylistic games to Fallen Order that's come out recently in terms of combat, swordplay, gameplay mechanics, platforming. And even though that's an open world game, whereas, Jedi Fallen Order is kind of half open, half closed kind of thing, I feel like the developers at Respawn should look to Ghost of Tsushima for how they should be building the next Fallen Order, because that game, I think, has taken that whole genre and really evolved it in a way that no one was really expecting, with the different, combat stances, the different sword styles, even the open world, the exploration of the game, the fact that you're on this character's journey and you're progressing the story in a way that's almost similar to like a Red Dead Redemption style game. Yeah. It's really combined it. And also, in a few days from now, I don't know when you're posting this, sorry, but I think it's tomorrow even, actually, the Ghost of Tsushima is getting like an online co-op multiplayer game mode that's dropping into the game. So I don't know if that fits in the context of a Star Wars experience, but there's just so many ideas out there. And I think that's part of the reason why some of the Star Wars games in the past have been cancelled at EA, because perhaps the ideas were just too audacious and too grand for them to achieve in the time allocated. Maybe it was just like, Star Wars has a notorious history of having cancelled games, and a lot of that was to do with around the time LucasArts was being shut down and the whole transition and Disney merger was happening. But, it's hard enough to build a video game, let alone a Star Wars themed video game where everything has to fall into this universe that's pre-existing and there's so many ideals and
heavily
things
monitored.
Yeah, exactly. to get approvals, man. I remember when I asked Dennis, when I got to interview him last year, I asked Dennis Brandville, what's the hardest thing about your job? And in one word, what's the hardest thing about your job? And he said approvals.
In one word, what's the hardest part of adding new content to the game, like heroes, reinforcements, maps, that kind of thing?
Approvals.
I thought that was pretty funny, getting stuff approved.
Yep. All of the stories that I've heard internally have been, well, yes, it's wonderful to get to work on a Star Wars license. Like, it's a dream job. There are a lot of drawbacks to it. Let's say something along Apex Legends. Like, the amount of content and the consistency that they have with Apex Legends is completely different than anything that a Star Wars title could do. Because if let's just say there's a Star Wars Legends, which is Apex Legends but Star Wars, to add, let's say you want to add Han to that, you have to get approvals. You have to make sure, like, what era Han do you want to add to it? Okay, the skin that he has, it has to be canon. There are a lot of different things that you have to take into account when you look at a game like Star Wars or Apex Legends. Like, you have to do certain things.
Yeah, voice lines as well. That's another big one, I think. That'd take, what can he say? What can't he say? What's he capable of doing? What's appropriate for Han? How should he appropriately act? How is he animated? What's his, all of these things. Perhaps some of what you're saying with, Apex obviously has a live service, which is kind of what Battlefront 2 had with, getting consistent updates into the game. But I think that's somewhat what a game like Galaxy of Heroes has as well. That's the mobile Star Wars game that has copped a lot of criticism, and I know a lot of people aren't necessarily pleased with its development and the lack of transparency between the developers and the game's community. But that game has had a live service for, I think, since 2016, and in a style similar to Apex, I guess, does get new characters, new content drops, new abilities added to the game that change the way it plays.
And it's also not held up to that same standard of canon that a game like Battlefront was held up to. They have continually added updates to it, but it seems like they have two different viewpoints. Like, there's the mobile game, which brings in an insane amount of money, and that's probably why they can do whatever they want to, because they are printing money there. But because it is a pay-to-win game.
Okay, yeah. That's true. Why does everything have to be canon, though? This is something I remember us talking about with Ek as well last time. Like, why can't we get a Star Wars game that is just for fun? Like, why does it have to fall into canon? Why can't it just be like another, Force Unleashed style game where it's just ridiculous over the top? You got, the combat game mode in that. Do you remember there was like that fighting battle arena game mode, and you could face off against like all these ridiculous matchups and stuff? Why can't we get a game like that? It's just for fun. Like, it's kids playing with toys. That's what it is. That's the game I want. Still
100% with you there. My goodness, it would be so much fun. Like, towards the end, I'd say Battlefront really pushed into that. Like, they were able to catch their stride, and like, I think it would have been awesome to see if they were able to get another year of support into Battlefront. Where it would have been there. But like, I love beating the crap out of Darth Vader with BB-8. Like, that's amazing. Like, so cool.
Agree. Yeah, it's fine. Like, why not? Why not, right? It's an experience that you were never going to have, and now that you've had it, you're like, yeah, it's fun. Why wouldn't I want more of this style of thing? It's ridiculous, but it doesn't need to be canon. Like, you're playing a sandbox game, right? It's supposed to push the boundaries and give you a new experience.
That is a fantastic point to be made.
And let's save the canon stuff for the story-based games, or even for Squadrons. Like, that's a multiplayer tight game set in a specific era at a specific time in the Star Wars timeline with specific starfighters. Like, that's fine. I'm cool with that, right? Jedi Fallen Order, same thing. It's a Jedi experience set after Order 66 and the Clone Wars, and it's a single-player story. Why can't we have a sandbox that we can just, have fun in?
Yeah, I know with Battlefront 2015, when they were in the development of that, and with the continued support with the Season Pass, their response to a lot of the requests were, we can't add that hero because it's not canon to the original trilogy. And I think that was a detriment to a lot of the stuff people wanted added. But even though, like, you look at that and you're like, well, it launched and you could have stormtroopers without helmets. That's not canon.
No.
You have Palpatine on Jakku, which that's not really canon. He was never there in like an official sense. So
that's true. That was the first video I made about Battlefront. The first Star Wars video I ever made was a public service announcement to all Battlefront players to wear your helmet in Battlefront. That was the video.
It was such
Yeah.
a huge issue. Like, it's funny to look at it now, like being through Battlefront 2's controversy, and like I love Battlefront 2015. Like, it was such a fun time. I loved that era. And it's great to see when like the biggest controversy was that stormtroopers didn't have helmets and not like a huge loot box thing.
I know, right? It's so true. It's like a matter of authenticity, not like, oh, they're stealing our money.
Yeah, simpler times.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think? Love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.
Stay bombastic.